This video starts off our coverage of imperfect competition. We're going to focus on the market structure for oligopoly. So for oligopoly, that's going to finish up our last market structure we're going to cover in the class. It's closer to monopoly than monopolistic competition is, but it is not as um, imperfectly competitive of a market as monopoly. We see that in oligopolies, there are at least a few firms operating. And generally, they can make identical or differentiated products. We're going to focus for our purposes on the models that look at when monopolies produce identical products. Okay, so you can ignore this differentiated part for our purposes. But just so you know, that's possible within our models for those to be modified. And we're just going to focus in on those models that have firms making identical goods. And then lastly, barriers to entry are key, right? That's one thing we discuss with DEM sets. And so for oligopoly, there needs to be some barriers to entry so that the number of firms is truly limited to being just a few. With this model, we're going to introduce strategic behavior. So previously in perfect competition and monopolistic competition, when we had several firms operating in the same market, they all behaved as if their production was in isolation, right? They didn't think about responding to their competitors. They didn't think about trying to undercut competitors' prices or anything like that. They just produced whatever amount of a product was going to maximize their profit. Okay. Now with oligopoly, you have firms aware that they're competing with others and trying to respond directly to what they do. And so there's going to be some influence of one firm's decision on the others. That means that our notion of equilibrium needs to adjust, right? We're still considering profit maximization in the long run for these firms, but now we're going to introduce this concept of Nash equilibrium. It's coming from game theory. And for Nash equilibrium, we're saying that there's equilibrium will be defined by this state where no firm wants to change their behavior given what other firms have chosen to do. Okay, so you can think about your seating in class as a Nash equilibrium. Most of you have a seat that you usually sit in, and given where everyone else is sitting, you're likely not going to want to change your seat, right? You're not going to feel like your position is improved by sitting somewhere else. That's what firms are experiencing when there's a Nash equilibrium for an oligopic market. They're not wanting to change their behavior given what their competitors are already choosing to do. All right. So because of this introduction of strategic behavior, we're going to start to use game theory to model the interactions between firms. All right, for our purposes in this lecture series, we're going to focus on collusion, right? We're going to look at the prisoner's dilemma game. And then moving to chapter 12, we'll focus in on game theory specifically. So with that, we're going to end our intro to oligopoly and pick up in the next video on collusion.